Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Today, I want to spend a few minutes talking to you all about a situation that happened in Colorado. A 57-year-old white man named Robert Louis Deere went to a Planned Parenthood office in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and began shooting. He shot and killed 3 people, and he wounded 9 other people. From what I remember, he was in a standoff with the police for about 6 hours. Eventually, he surrendered. He was taken into custody without being injured, without being harmed. Uh, he surrendered peacefully, and he was put in custody and taken to jail without incident. I've come across quite a few articles about this story, but one article stood out, and this article is entitled, "Did Whiteness Save the Life of the Alleged Planned Parenthood Shooter?" And this article raises profound questions about race and the criminal justice system. But before I go to that point, I just want to also point out that right now, the authorities don't have a clear motive behind the shooting. They don't know with certainty what motivated this man to carry out this act of violence. According to news reports, Robert Louis Deere made statements about baby body parts. And if you all have been keeping up with the news, you know that there's been a lot of controversy involving Planned Parenthood and their use of fetal tissue after abortion proceedings. So, um, So there's some speculation that he was perhaps motivated by his anti-abortion views, and also there's information about his history. Apparently, he distributed anti-Obama pamphlets at one point. So apparently, he's a right-wing activist of some sort. So, that's all the information that we have in terms of a possible motive behind this. And I may talk about that a little bit later in this video, but for now, I want to talk about some of the profound questions of racism that this article raises. The article talks about how often when white people have been accused of acts of mass murder, often they are taken into custody without incident. They're arrested. They're not attacked by the police. They're not beaten by the police. They're not shot by the police. They are peacefully arrested and put into custody. This article cites the example of Dylann Roof. He's the person who shot up that church in Charleston, South Carolina, killing 9 people, whose only crime was being black and Christian. He just massacred those people. Then you had the example of Timothy McVeigh, the terrorist who bombed a federal building in Oklahoma years ago. And it also cites the example of the shooter, James Holmes. He's the one who shot up that movie theater. All these people were taken into custody peacefully, without incident, without being harmed, without a hair on their head being harmed. This guy, Dylann Roof, they peacefully arrested him, put him in the back of the car, and they offered him hamburgers. Offered this killer hamburgers, this man who killed 9 people. Now, this article that I'm mentioning, it also compares the situation involving those white criminals to the situation involving black people and how the police interact with black people. It cites the example of Tamir Rice. That's the young brother in Ohio who had a play gun at a park. The police arrived on the scene, and within seconds they shot and killed that brother dead. He had a play gun. A 12-year-old black boy just gunned down. They didn't ask him any questions. They didn't ask him to put the gun down, from what I understand. They didn't give him any opportunity to surrender. All they did is ran up on him and shot him. And this article also mentions the example of John Crawford, who was shot and killed in Walmart. The brother picked up a toy gun or air gun, from what I understand, something that's non-threatening or non-lethal. He picked it up in the store because that store sells pellet guns and, toy guns that aren't actual firearms that can be used to hurt people. So the brother is in the store and somebody calls the police. The police arrive on the scene and just shoot this brother dead. They don't ask him any questions. They don't ask him to drop the gun. They just murk this brother, kill him within a second. And then we also have the recent example in Chicago of Laquan McDonald. This brother had a knife, and according to the video, which is obvious and clear evidence, he didn't lunge toward the police or anything. In fact, he was trying to walk past the police. He was walking away from the police, and a police officer opened fire, shot this brother 16 times, killing him. Just shooting him dead. So you have two different situations. You have these killers, these white killers who've killed massive numbers of people. These people are given the benefit of the doubt. No matter how criminal, no matter how demented, no matter how evil they are, they're given the benefit of the doubt. They're given an opportunity to surrender peacefully. But when it comes to black people, it's a shoot first and ask questions later type of situation. Because black lives mean absolutely nothing to law enforcement. Those innocent two young men that I mentioned, Tamir Rice and John Crawford, they didn't commit any crime, but yet they were killed immediately. But you have these armed killers, these white armed killers who have killed people, who have butchered people, who have massacred people. But yet the police give them the benefit of the doubt. And this guy, Robert Louis Deere, he actually killed a white police officer, and they still gave him the benefit of the doubt. They gave him the opportunity to non-violently surrender. They didn't give that opportunity to Tamir Rice. They didn't give that opportunity to John Crawford. And they certainly didn't give that opportunity to Laquan McDonald. So there's a double standard in this country. Black people, black suspects are executed immediately, whereas these white killers, they can massacre lots of people and they are peacefully apprehended. Also, another aspect to this race issue that needs to be discussed is this whole idea of collective punishment. When these white people commit these atrocities, they are not judged the same as other people who commit acts of violence or terrorism. For instance, if you compare their acts of violence to the acts of Muslim or Arab terrorists, there's simply no comparison. First of all, these people are not called, when white people commit mass murder and mass violence, they're not called terrorists. They're not called thugs. They're not referred to as gangsters and other derogatory terms. Instead, they are labeled as mentally ill. Often. That's the label that they toss on these people. And we know, like anyone with any basic understanding of criminal law knows that mental illness is a defense to many criminal offenses. So these people are basically given a pass and they're judged as individuals, not as a collective. Whereas with, if you have a situation involving an Arab or a Muslim, all Arabs and Muslims are tarnished with the label of terrorists. Whereas these white people are just judged as misguided individuals. Nobody's going around profiling white men, even though white men disproportionately commit these acts of mass violence. Nobody's profiling the white man. Nobody's talking about closing any churches because of some extreme Christian. And that's what it appears to be in this case involving Robert Louis Deere. Someone that's an extremist, someone that went to extreme measures to express his political ideology. That's what it appears to be. But these people are judged as individuals. And this guy, Robert Deere, they're trying to say, well, he's a madman. He's a madman. See, when they kill black people, they collectively judge black people. They start to talk about pathology in the black community. They start to lecture black people. They try to lecture black people about how they're not good mothers and good fathers. They demonize the victim of these acts of police brutality. But they don't do the same to, when it involves white people. Black people are tarred and feathered as a group and condemned as a group. When there's a situation, for instance, involving inner city violence, they label black people as the most violent people on the face of the earth because of acts of individuals. They want to tarnish the entire community because of acts of individual criminals. Whereas in the case of these white killers, they're just judged as individuals. Just judged as individuals. It's a shame. And they want to collectively punish black people. So they racially profile black people based on the crimes of a minority within the black community. But they're not racially profiling any white people. They're simply not. And, these crimes, are just crazy. I mean, every time, a black person is killed by the police or something like that, they want to say, well, what about black on black violence? They bring that up to deflect, to take the conversation off course. Imagine if, the people were complaining about the terrorist acts of, for instance, ISIS or Al Qaeda or something about like that, complaining about what they have done to America and America's interests. Imagine if someone responded to that concern by saying, what about white on white violence? You need to take care of that before you can complain about those Arab terrorists or those Muslim terrorists. If someone were to say something like that, you would look at them like they were crazy. You would look at them as if they lost their damn mind. And that's the way I look at these people when they want to bring up this black on black violence nonsense. Because the two things are two different issues. In all of those examples that I cited, many of the victims of those crimes were white people. But you don't hear anybody referring to this violence as quote unquote white on white violence. It's just insane, like the double standards that exist in this society. Most people commit violence among their own group, but yet they want to label violence in the inner city as black on black violence as a way to demonize the entire community. Now, I just want to move on to talk about this whole issue of abortion and Planned Parenthood. I don't understand like why these right-wing people commit violence as a way to protest against violence. They condemn abortion because it involves the taking of life, but yet they proceed to take other people's life to attack abortion. That doesn't make any kind of rational sense to me. I mean, if you are for life, if you're pro-life, why are you taking people's life? Why are you taking other people's lives? And, I never did any video like stating my position on abortion. Um, and I don't think I'm going to really address that issue right now, like my moral position on it. But I just will say this, it just seems like, this person had a political agenda and, apparently he used violence to enforce that agenda. And that's simply terrorism. He targeted civilians. But again, they're not labeling this as terrorism because terrorism has to have a Muslim or Arab face in this country. And that's just hypocrisy. Terrorism isn't confined to one particular religion or one particular ethnic group. Any group of people can engage in terrorism. And what these people have done, these white people have done, is terrorism. And it needs to be condemned as such.